So I pissed off a lot of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom fanboys and girls, which is pretty funny. So basically what I did is I posted a video stream clip or whatever. It was taken from one of our streams, and Jacob just cut it up and was like, yeah, here's Luke checking the Tears of the Kingdom trailer that they dropped and the whatever, ensuing discussion that happened afterwards. And the discussion was basically me saying that I think I've been concerned about Tears of the Kingdom just because I think, releasing a sequel on the same hardware that the last game launched on 6 years ago, which was already outdated 6 years ago, that makes me a little concerned for how they're going to continue to take it up a notch in the future. Like, how are they going to make the sequel really stand out and feel like a sequel and not just Breath of the Wild 1.5 or a huge expansion to Breath of the Wild. And I expressed this concern I have. And at the end of the video, my conclusion was still, if anybody could pull this off, it's the team at Nintendo and the guys working on this. They show in the trailer multiple huge boss encounters, big set pieces, things that I'm very, very interested in. So I think, if I was a betting man, I'd be putting down good money on Breath of the Wild, or Tears of the Kingdom rather, being pretty great. I don't know if it's going to tap into the same magical feeling I felt for Breath of the Wild, because that's a very rare thing, but I'm sure it's still going to be pretty good. You would have thought I gutted a puppy on stream while singing I'm a Barbie Girl. People lost their minds. It's amazing. It's amazing. A lot of people, you might have noticed some people popping into chat occasionally who are like, so why do you hate Breath of the Wild, Luke? Why do you hate Tears of the Kingdom, Luke? Those people clearly didn't watch the video because I finished the clip by saying, I actually think this is going to be really, really good. And so it's just kind of funny. But I think probably what happened is it was shared to a Discord or a subreddit or something, and people came in, didn't watch the clip, and instead just were like, this guy is a hater on Tears of the Kingdom. Let's mess with him. And that's fine. I don't think they realize that I get all of the views either way. They still generate ad revenue for me. So I'm like, I don't care. Yeah, share it to all the hate Discords. I don't care. I get off better, It's just awesome. But I don't think they realize that. However, I thought it generated an interesting discussion. And there were some people that were honestly in the comment section like, well, I mean, honestly, I think that Breath of the Wild is pretty overrated. I don't think it's that great of a game. So my general stance is that while I think Breath of the Wild certainly has a lot of problems, I think that they have, in that game, they demonstrated a mastery of open world design, pacing, segmentation, so many little tricks that they employ there for capturing your attention while you're running through a field. Have you see this thing and this thing? Both of those are interesting and spark some curiosity, so you want to seek out that thing. They do it masterfully. And there's a reason why so many games have taken Breath of the Wild as inspiration and failed at copying it. It's a tremendous accomplishment in open world design. That being said, it still has problems. The weapon degradation system is hot donkey ass. It just is. Okay? I'm going to be real. I understand why they did it. They did it so that you actively explore the world to find more equipment, which replaces the equipment that constantly is breaking. I get that. It doesn't change the fact that it makes the game frustrating and unfun in those moments. Okay? You find multiple moments where you have a really good weapon that you got from somebody and you won't want to use it because you don't want it to break. So you just sit on it. And then the Master Sword, which is this crazy, powerful, magical, mysterious sword, you end up just using for mining and chopping down trees and stuff like that, because at least then it runs out of energy, but it doesn't break. And then you just put it in your inventory, use a different sword for the rest of it. So all of these other elements, I can acknowledge I love Breath of the Wild and I've spent so many hours in it and I love that game dearly. I have not played a game like that obsessively since. It really was a magical experience for me. However, I can acknowledge that it's got issues. However, I still really, really love it. that apparently that type of nuance though is evidently too much for some of these fanboys to handle. So I thought it'd be funny if I brought that nuance into a debate where I argued with somebody who very outspokenly has been against Breath of the Wild, has made some videos being very, very negative towards it, blah, blah, blah. However, that person spoke with me yesterday and the day before. We had planned to meet up initially at 11 my time, which is now 3 hours ago. And then I was like, okay, well, maybe they got hours mixed up. Maybe at noon they'll show up. Didn't show up. I've been sending messages and still nothing. So they evidently have just ghosted me. So I'm not going to shout them out. I'm not going to do any of that. Because why would I give them that when they just ghosted me? But there was originally a debate planned for today, and then they chickened out and bailed. Whatever. To counter that, I pulled up some various Reddit posts of people who have unpopular opinions of Breath of the Wild and think that it's actually really, really terrible. So I thought we would go through that. There's also some people in chat, I understand, who have less than amazing opinions of Breath of the Wild, and I would like to hear what each of you guys think of Breath of the Wild as well. I'm down to hear all of your feedback, but I thought to begin we could go through this post by Hot Bean Juice. Intentionally, I have not gone through this because I want to go through it fresh and experience it myself with you guys live. This is on r/unpopular opinion. I don't know how serious this one will be, but we're going to check it out regardless. So he has a list of different things that frustrated him and that he would like to see changed and reasons why he doesn't think it's actually that amazing. To begin, I know that immediately this comes across as trying to be edgy, give me karma post, but I write this as someone who thoroughly loved much that Breath of the Wild has to offer. Here's the background. I've played through 8 of the Zelda games, not including Breath of the Wild, and I definitely consider myself a huge fan. In an effort to have fully magical experience, I successfully avoided all trailers and Reddit posts about Breath of the Wild leading up to my own purchase about a month ago. This was posted, I don't know, did they have the exact date? 4 years ago, whenever it was, 4 years ago, exactly. I don't know. It's archived. Created, and I think that's when the subreddit was created. Anyway, in terms of the open world graphics and general gameplay, the game is phenomenal. I also applaud the effort to change things up and build diversity into the way you can approach situations. And despite how negatively this post will sound, I did have fun playing this game. The problems I have with Breath of the Wild are thus, forgive me if other posts already said everything I did. I didn't want to be swayed by their opinions. They go on to say, I know the idea was to provide a freedom to choose your story, but the ability to approach any boss or divine beast at any time was a drawback to me, primarily because it made everything insanely easy. Even as someone who has played through certain Zelda games multiple times, it's templates that have always provided us the excitement and frustration. Even replaying, I'd spend countless hours trying to figure out those maddening temples. Did I say template? I can't read. Jesus. My brain is fried. I don't claim to be an exceptional gamer. I say I'm an average or below, but there wasn't a temple in Breath of the Wild that took me more than 40 minutes. The creative boss fights have always been stable to the Zelda franchise, but I literally did the exact same thing to defeat each one. And Lionel's are easily harder than any of the Ganons. This I think is totally fair. The Ganon fights I found a little underwhelming. I still thought that they were pretty cool and epic. But I thought they were fair. No, it's not an article. What are you talking about, Kazuma? No, it's not an article. This is this guy's opinion of the game. The game came out 6 freaking years ago. Okay, closer to a decade than current. Okay, so of course, like it doesn't matter if the post is from 4 years ago or from yesterday. It's the same freaking game. What are you talking about? Because I want to chill out. But the boss fights, regardless, yeah, I would say that enemy variety was pretty lackluster. The fact that they have to rely on reskins of bosses and mini bosses and enemy types is a little frustrating. I would also take the stance of like Joseph Anderson's takedown of the combat I thought was fair. The fact that it's just purely heart based and individual unit based, with damage reduction based tied damage reductions tied to base numbers on each armor set, being overly simplistic. And it basically makes it so when you wear heavy armor, like the knight, the suit of armor, whatever it is it's called, that one pretty much negates any serious damage you could take. It just kind of kills the fun of the combat or anything. Also, I will still insist, the parries are super inconsistent. Parries and not necessarily the parries, the whatever backflip thing, the action slowdown, whatever that's called, I don't remember, it's been a minute. What was that called? Something flurry rush. Yeah, flurry rush, I think is what it was. That very inconsistent, especially on the master playthrough mode, whatever. So I think that's fine. Do I think that like that's enough to make the game bad? I would say personally not. I think the reason Breath of the Wild is great is, like I said, for the open world design, for the exploration. I would agree the boss fight variety is not tremendous. The Ganon fights are not that crazy interesting. And I'm guessing he's about to go into a lot of detail about the whole divine beast mixed with the lack of dungeons, because that was the biggest complaint people had when the game came out. So I'm guessing that's what it's going to be. The investment is gone in many ways. I can appreciate the addition of new weapons and being able to use them early, but where is the excitement? I know opinions vary on the need to grind, but the feeling that I could technically do everything I needed to be able to do from the beginning is a big killjoy. Okay, so trying to be as understanding and good faith as I can be. So he's saying he's frustrated that the game gives you all the tools you need to use up front, and that there aren't necessarily new transformational tools you gain later in the game. Okay. I would say like I can understand that, especially coming off of games where you are constantly gaining pretty transformational abilities through the game. You still gain abilities from each of the divine beasts, of course. However, I get what he means. Like each of the puzzles, each of the rooms that you go to, you have all the tools at your disposal from day one. Again, that's more of an artifact of the way that they designed the game as an open world adventure game first and foremost, and then as like a dungeon puzzle solver secondly, because they wanted to make sure no matter where you went on the map, if you went into one of those areas, you could solve all the puzzles there. And the only way you can do that without gating certain areas off is by having it so you have all of the tools at your disposal from day one, which is why like you can't use those divine beast abilities inside of those shrine puzzle rooms and stuff, because it would just break it, right? So it's a weird arbitrary rule that they set up. Like you can't climb the walls in those puzzle rooms, because if you could, it would just break everything. But, you know, is there a reason why? It's just because that's what they have to do to keep it consistent. So I would say this is more just a matter of personal preference. I understand what they're saying, and that this maybe is not his preference, but I would say like they sacrificed that structure of giving you new abilities and tools steadily throughout the game for the ability to give the player the freedom to go anywhere and do whatever they want in whatever order they want. If you don't like it, I get it. I understand that, but that also does not mean that like I don't think it's a bad choice. Saying that it's boring is a little strong. There's a very strong sense of fulfillment and reward when you finally acquire the skill or tool you need to keep going. I found myself feeling that the only real thing I was working towards were the heart containers, which is boring. I don't know, for me, the heart containers represented a chance to go into higher level areas to discover new things. Because especially areas with like high level Lionels or like Ganon's castle, where there's some really high enemy and high damage output enemies, having more heart containers, having more meals cooked, and you know, all of the better armor sets and all that, it empowers you to go and explore new areas And so for me, that took, in my mind, the place of skills or tools that keep you going. But I guess it's just a different way of thinking about it. If you think of it just as upgrading your max health, I guess, but there's a lot more to it than just heart containers. While pretty useful, personally found questing for the 4 hero powers very unsatisfying. I've defeated Ganon and have even completed about 3/4 of the Korok seeds and shrines, and I just really find my desire to keep going non-existent. I mean, by the time you've defeated Ganon and 3/4 of the Korok seeds, I forget, there's either 700 or 900 Korok seeds in the game. Do you have any idea how many hours it would take to get 3/4 of them? And also, how do you know you have 3/4 of them? Is this guy like playing through Breath of the Wild with a guide? I don't have any problems with guides. But Breath of the Wild is an example of a game that your first playthrough, you really should not be going through with a guide. Oh my God, did he just say that there's a right and wrong way to play the game? Yes. In this case, yes, I do think there is. Didn't love the DLC. That's one where we're going to agree. I thought the DLC, the motorcycle was kind of cool, but I thought the process of getting the motorcycle was hot dog water. So I'm going to agree on that. And I guess overrated. So this is kind of like one of the key distinctions. If you're going to say it's overrated, you have to clarify what you mean by overrated. Like, what is it overrated? What do you think the rating is if you're saying it's overrated? Because if you're saying that, like, my perception is that Breath of the Wild is a very good game, and I would say it's a masterpiece of open world game design of, well, I already ran through that, but I think it's a masterpiece of open world design. Is it a perfect game? Far from it. There's a lot of stuff they do in it that is pretty stupid and that I don't like. But I would say it's a masterpiece of open world design. So far, little things that he's gone into, like, you know, frustrations over boss fight variety and complexity. I get that. Lack of dungeons. Understand that. That I understand. But saying that you've, I don't know, this stands out to me as suggesting that he probably, I don't know. I would be shocked if he was not using a guide. I get the vibe. 3/4 of Korok seeds and shrines. I mean, it also is just a misunderstanding. I don't think, maybe this is a hot take too. I don't know. But I don't think you're expected by the devs to collect all of the Korok seeds or all of the shrines. Like, I really don't think that you're supposed to. Why else would they put 900 of them in? You know, like 900. As far as I can tell, having played a lot of Breath of the Wild, you are like, they sprinkle all these Korok seeds in. So as you go through the world and you explore and do all of this stuff, you stumble onto them as you go around. That's what makes it kind of satisfying, because as you explore, it's like, oh, that pile of rocks is weird, interesting. And then you go in and then you check it out. And then you do this, this, and this. It's good fun. But I get the vibe that he probably was going through on a guide. And if he went through on a guide, I can understand why he felt like the world design was not a thing. Anyway, the reward for meticulously finding Korok seeds is to improve upon a system that I already find disappointing. Weapons breaking, agreed. Why I would want to complete a shrine to get slightly different or often worse version of the weapon I already have that breaks. The Master Sword is the only strong in a very specific realm. Otherwise, it sucks. I don't think it sucks. I guess it depends on what he means by realm. But I don't think it sucks. I just think because it breaks but then cools down, it just makes it so it becomes your mining weapon and your axe for cutting down trees and things. I like, it takes this magical weapon of vast power and turns it into basically a shovel. Like it kind of spoils the whole thing a little bit. So I can see that. Together, it just feels like they tried to make a decision that made the Master Sword as least fun as possible. It feels like the tripping feature in Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Why? Okay, super weak storyline. You hardly see Ganon or learn of his plans. Actually, what were his plans? He's just there and suddenly I need to stop him. Urbosa is the only slightly engaging storyline. I can't even remember the names of the other heroes. You show up in a village and are suddenly thrust into companionship with the exact same initial conversation for each and are told you have to go to defeat the divine beast. Despite being told what the divine beasts are wreaking havoc, everyone seems to be enjoying life to the fullest. While it's a masterpiece of open world design, I will agree that they do not do a great job of like creating this symbiosis between the attitudes of the civilians of the world and the world itself and what they're describing is going on. Because everybody, like in terms of tone, everybody's just kind of going about their day-to-day life, not too worried about it. You can find some people that of course are like being jumped by the little piglets. And you can find like, I know they're not called piglets for the record. I know I just call them piglets because otherwise I don't know how to pronounce them. But yeah, tonally I could see it being distinct and see it there. Super weak storyline. Again, this is something I mentioned earlier in the stream. Just because a game is really, really good in one area does not mean it's good at everything. Okay. I can say that Breath of the Wild is a masterpiece of open world design. That does not mean it's a masterpiece of open world design and narrative and gameplay or combat rather, and boss fights and all these other things, which is why for me it's so cringy when somebody's like Breath of the Wild is the best open world adventure game that Nintendo's ever made or that's ever been made. It's like, okay, interesting, but does that mean it has the best combat of any game of all time? Hopefully you say no. Hopefully. But there's a lot of fanboys who will, because they think that if you accept this thing and if you put it on the pedestal as the best thing ever, as the best game ever, that then you run into all these other issues where you have to start defending it in every single instance. And you have to start saying that, Breath of the Wild has the best combat. Clearly it doesn't. Breath of the Wild has the best story. Clearly it doesn't. No. And when you try to defend that, you end up sounding like a maniac because everybody's like, what the hell are you talking about? Having to constantly change equipment because there's a thunderstorm got old fast. I actually kind of love that, Dan. I'll be real. I actually kind of loved having to think about what I was wearing, what I had equipped. And I personally, I didn't think that thunderstorms were that common. So for me, it wasn't that big of a deal. So, I mean, I won't, the storyline being weak, repetition of shrines is something he hasn't really gotten into, but that for me is one of my biggest frustrations, is that some shrines are like literally 2 minutes long, others require 15 minutes. So there's certainly problems I have with it, but again, it matters what you're establishing the rated as. Like, what is it being rated as? The best game ever? That's why I think saying something is the best game ever is really stupid, because you end up having to defend a lot of weird choices, because no game is perfect. Games like The Witcher 3, Red Dead, Breath of the Wild, all these games have issues. And to pretend like they don't just makes you look like a fanboy and makes you lose all credibility with somebody who's thinking a little bit more critically, you know? I don't know. And then this one, and by the way, his last point was DLC. My own personal feeling is that when I buy a game, I'm buying the whole game. Some DLC is fine. Half of it, I'm not interested in. Okay, so he's upset about the size of the DLC without Zelda being... Okay, so he's just upset there is DLC. Okay, that's stupid. Yeah, I don't have a problem with there being DLC. My problem is the DLC we did get was garbage. So I sort of agree, I guess. Anyway, this one, the most overrated game ever in my opinion. I'm a huge Zelda fan ever since Ocarina of Time. I was actually glad Nintendo decided to turn it into an open world, as to be honest, Zelda was getting very repetitive. Watch out. They're coming for you. But they didn't do a good job at open world in my opinion, and definitely not staying true to Zelda. Staying true to Zelda, I will not pretend to be an expert in. I don't know. But saying they did not do a good job at the open world design is really surprising to me. This is one where I think I'll have more meat on the bone here. You could argue that Zelda was kind of a small open world anyway, like Ocarina, for example. You got Tyrell Castle as kind of the center, then a village, Volcano, Waterport, Gerudo Valley, the forest, and Hyrule Castle. Breath of the Wild is just this, yet bigger, but in this case, to me, bigger is not better at all. So I'm going to say why I don't like this. Okay, I'm down. No dungeons. Like I said before, it was just a lot bigger of a map. It had basically the same areas as any other Zelda game, yet it lost the dungeons and didn't have anything to make up for them. It had shrines. Well, this is what made up for them. Like, the shrines are what they did in place. You don't have to like it, and I would agree. I don't think it's as fun as having big dungeons, but they clearly took all of the effort that would have gone into having a big dungeon, and they cut it up into little pieces, like little cookie cutter pieces, and sprinkled that around the map, and that took the place of dungeons, and then mixed with the divine beasts sort of as their own version of dungeons, with big puzzles and stuff. That was sort of what they replaced them with. But I mean, they replaced it with something. They didn't just cut dungeons and then do nothing else. They put shrines and then they put divine beasts. I don't think it satisfied most Zelda fans, but that's clearly what they were trying to do. It had shrines, but you have to have health and stamina. But it have you health and stamina, which is important. But after you gathered enough, what's the point? Oh, they get you maybe? So they get you upgrades to health and stamina. But after you gathered enough, what's the point in going any further? Okay. The divine beasts are actually decent, but after them, that's it. Okay. So he just complains that there's no dungeons, asserts there's nothing to make up for them, and then lists the things that make up for them in the form of shrines and the divine beasts, which he says he thought that they were decent. So this is just kind of dumb. Weapons that break. I totally agree. I didn't mind it until I got a weapon I actually wanted to keep. Yeah. No. And then what happens is you end up holding on to weapons, sitting on them, and then never using them because you don't want them to break. So I agree. The weapon degradation system is super toxic. I do not like it. At least, like, if you're saying, clearly the reason that they had this was because they wanted players to actively go out, explore more, to get more, like, new weapons and more weapons to replace the ones that were constantly breaking. There's a reason for the madness, right? At least give us the option to, like, go out and collect different ingredients and then take it to, like, a blacksmith to craft an upgrade to the weapon so it doesn't break, or so that it recharges like the master sword or something like that. Like, give us some means of avoiding the constant mind-numbing tedium of, like, oh, I used this sword 5 times, now it's totally broken and it exploded, I've got to go somewhere else. It's just super annoying. I haven't seen, like, anybody try to argue that they like the weapon degradation system. I guess now that I've said that in the comment section, there's going to be somebody that's saying why they love it, but I just haven't encountered it personally. But moving on, nothing to do after the game. I remember completing it and thinking, what the hell do I do now? I don't need to do the shrines as I don't need any more health, and the weapon I might get just break anyway. There's no point of me exploring as there's nothing to explore. I think what you mean is there's no reason to explore. I would say most games, once they're over, they stop being as fun as when they were not over. Yeah. I don't. So you're complaining that once the game was over, it wasn't as fun and there wasn't as much to do as when the game wasn't over? Okay. Stunning take, bro. There is still stuff to explore, but obviously once you've defeated the biggest boss in the game, there's less reason to grind up. Yeah. But that's true of Red Dead. That's true of The Witcher 3. That's true of any of these other games that you love, open world adventure games. Once you've defeated the big bosses that are really hard, a lot of the time you'll not have as much narrative reason to continue exploring. True. That's just because video games have to end at some point. Like, it's not that crazy. That's true of insert game. Yeah, it's okay. Well, hot take, bro. Where's the music? Okay, this one's really weird. Every now and then you might get a little bit of music that lasts for like 3 seconds, then goes off. Zelda is known for great music. It's been released on CDs, performed live, yet it's missing in the actual game. Maybe he had a glitch. Breath of the Wild has some amazing music. Like, I will grant you, it's a little more chill. It's like softer. It's not as melodic, but it has a very good soundtrack. Like, saying Breath of the Wild's music is missing is a weird take also. Compare it to other open world games How is this world better than The Witcher 3, Skyrim, and Red Dead 2? It's rated higher than all three. If someone can explain to me why it's better, then go ahead. Red Dead 2 is actually pretty much the same, in the same way that it isn't fantasy, it's realistic. Red Dead 2 is actually pretty much the same, in the way that it isn't fantasy, it's realistic. It's the same in the way it's different. Okay, my brain hurts. Okay, you feed yourself. You must look after your weapons. It's the world you must survive. Pretty much Red Dead 2 is the real Breath of the Wild. Yet it's not universally acclaimed like Zelda. Is this true? Red Dead 2 is universally acclaimed. Am I just missing something? Carl, I ate pizza yesterday. It was kind of mid, to be honest. There was nothing left to eat after I finished it. That's funny. Not as Breath of the Wild. Yeah, if I recall, the biggest concerns with Red Dead 2, and the reason like I found it kind of frustrating, is that it feels like the same Red Dead or the same Rockstar game, same like UI, same structure, same basically everything that they had done before, but just with modern tech and a high-end engine and stuff like that. And in that capacity, it worked great. I mean, it was a tremendous game. But it certainly was not this like stunning reinvention of the formula, but it didn't need to be. Like it was resting, I think I titled my critique of it, I said it was resting on near perfect laurels. And I would still stand by that. Like I think it's just the Red Dead formula that Rockstar designed for the first game was so good that they could basically just do Red Dead 1.5 with a new engine, new tech, new world, all this stuff, new characters. But the same basic like skeleton there, and it's still an amazing, tremendous game. But it's also like, do you want them to just reinvent everything every time for no reason? Like, okay. As for Breath of the Wild's universal acclaim, I would say, yeah, it's critically acclaimed. It's universally praised and beloved. I don't know why the Metacritic score is a little higher than Red Dead's. I guess take that up with the critics. I don't know. Like the people that they tend to have reviewing games are fans of the franchises that are established. There's a lot more diehard fans of Zelda as of 2017 than there were of Red Dead in 2018, simply because they're, you know, one franchise is far older than the other, of course, for one. Pop culture, you know, influence is also vastly different. So, of course, people are going to hold the Zelda game a little nearer to their hearts than the Red Dead game, but both are very well received. And I think we're going to nitpick within a few Metacritic points, which is not a clear data point to demonstrate like critical or the quality of game. A Metacritic score down to a few points is just like, it's an accident of mathematics. It's an accident of the averaging of these scores, because Metacritic has to decide which publications get allowed in, and if they didn't accept this person, then the average would drop. And, you know, so the whole thing is just, it's a weird thing to point to. And comparing it to other open worlds, I would agree Breath of the Wild is tremendous. I actually agree with the Red Dead 2 comparison. I think it's pretty clear that there's a lot of similarities in how they're designed, with very long time between individual moments of interest, things like that. We've done videos where I've broken that down in spreadsheets before. So I've spent a lot of time breaking down why I think both games have compelling open worlds that are interesting to explore. But this whole bullet point is basically, I like Red Dead 2 more. And that's awesome. I'm glad you do. But like, that doesn't mean Breath of the Wild is bad. Clever Nintendo. They make the game seem bigger than it actually is, putting the Divine Beast in each corner of the map, making it hard to get there, so you take longer to get there. It's actually a pretty restricted game to call it open world, like the other three games I just mentioned. Did these ever restrict you? Oh my god, dude, what on earth are you talking about? How's Skellige? How do you like Skellige, dude? And like, what? What are you talking about? The other three games are not restricted? Dude, Skellige's locked behind level 16, which takes a good little while to get to. And you just straight up, if you go there, you're done. You're done. You can't do it. You have to be the right level. Like The Witcher 3 is very restrictive. It's level gated out the ass. It was one of my frustrations with the game back when I did that critique like 6 years ago, where I said it honestly hurts my immersion to be able to go in and like be Geralt and walk into a horde of bandits over here and demolish them, cutting them in half all over the place. And then I go over to this group of bandits and they breathe on me and I fall over dead. But it's because of the level gating, and it's just a restriction of how the, like, it's an RPG, it's an action RPG, like it's gonna happen. Okay, it just happens. But he's saying that this game is restrictive because they put them on 4 corners of the map. Do you want them all clumped together? What are you talking? Like, it's just one of those things where it's like, okay, play it through. Okay, you don't like that they're spread out. Okay. So what would you rather? Would you rather them be clumped together? Would you rather them be spread out differently? Like what are you like even complaining about? I don't understand. It's just a weird, like, it seems like you started writing a bullet point and it gets steadily worse as time goes on. Where's the music? I get it. It's maybe not as melodic and as densely packed with music as other Zelda games. However, there's still music. It has a tremendous soundtrack. And like it's just a different soundtrack for different kinds of games. If you filled in every moment of the game with the same type of music as in previous games, it wouldn't feel right, which is why it has to be different. That's why open world audio is different than like anyway. So like he starts strong, no dungeons. I agree. That's something to be frustrated by, especially if you're a longtime fan of Zelda. I get it. But then he goes and says it had it lost the dungeons and didn't have anything to make up for them. And then he lists the things that made up for them and actually agrees the divine beasts are actually pretty decent. And then just moves on as if he just made his point. It's like, no dungeons. Yeah, I think you have to acknowledge that the shrines are there and that they paired with the divine beasts are the thing there. But he says there isn't anything to make up for them, mentions them, and then just hand waves them away. It's like, okay, you can say they suck, but at least like don't try to hand wave away. Put a little bit more effort into it. Weapons that break, totally agree. This thing sucks. No contention there. It's why I would never say Breath of the Wild has one of the best combat systems ever, because it clearly doesn't. The combat system and the weapon degradation system's terrible. This is one of the stupidest things I've ever read in my life. Where was the pizza? Oh, it was Carl. Yeah, it was Carl. I ate a pizza yesterday. It was kind of mid, to be honest. There was nothing left to eat after I finished it. Exactly. He's complaining that after he finishes the game, there wasn't much to do. Like, okay, what the hell? The music, I don't know. There's a lot you can say about Breath of the Wild. Saying that the music's bad is a weird one. Compare it to, or to be completely fair, saying that the music is like non-existent. It's there for like 3 seconds and then turns off. This is just factually wrong. Like demonstrably wrong. We could pull up the clip and show the music. What are you talking about? Compared to other open worlds, okay, you liked Red Dead 2 more. Awesome, love it. But that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with how they designed this one. You just like that one more. Maybe because of the setting. You even say that Red Dead 2 is actually pretty much the same in the same way that it isn't fantasy, it's realistic. So it's the same in the sense that it's not the same. Makes sense. And then clever Nintendo, the 4 divine beasts were scattered around the map to make it so you have to travel between them. Man. I don't know, man. I'm baffled. My brain hurts. Conclusion, it's not a bad game. I'd probably give it a 6 out of 10. I also reckon the critics and the people would do as well if it didn't have, I think he meant wouldn't do as well. I also reckon the critics and people would do as well. I think he means it wouldn't do as well, like rating wise, if it didn't have Zelda on the title. Monsters and Gods and Monsters. Oh, this was the original name for Immortals Phoenix Rising. It is coming out next year. It looks similar. I bet it will get nowhere near the acclaim the Zelda game has. It also could be a better game as well. I would agree. I think if you scrapped the Zelda title and if you had it released under some unknown publisher and stuff, I think it probably would not be taken as seriously. But that's also just an artifact of having your game be part of an established franchise. But in general, if a game is really, really good, it's going to stand on its own merits. It will eventually rise to the top. Like Valheim. Valheim came out of nowhere and ended up being a phenomenon because it was just a good game that launched at a perfect time for it. Like, nobody knew what that game was. Nobody knew who that studio was. Came out of nowhere, but it rose to the top because it was really, really good. Some amazing games don't rise to the top, to be fair. But in general, I think the attitude and what we should go with is that good games tend to be rated like highly because they're good. Immortals was an incredible game, flew under the radar. I will say, Immortals Phoenix Rising, I do think is underrated. I think it should get more credit. And if you like Breath of the Wild, I think you'll like it. I think they lean too much into these like really long, sluggish, like puzzle sequences and like dream realm sequences that kind of got boring after a while. But in general, I thought it was kind of quirky and fun. That's hilarious that the fact that the music follows two-player means he stopped his own music. Oh, like, yeah, he killed the enemy and the music stopped and he's like, why no music here? It's the same thing. Like, he complains that after he finishes the game's over. Then he's like, after I killed the enemy, the music that plays when the enemy is alive stopped. What is this? It's just weird. They can both coexist. Law. I don't know why people have to bring down something else because their favorite thing is often compared to it. Yeah, it's just, I think it goes back to the tribalistic thing where everybody likes to have their team. And the thing with big franchises a lot of the time is that big franchises become one big team. And as a result of that, like it just becomes Halo's better than all these other games for 15 reasons. Or it could be, Call of Duty's way better than Apex for all of these reasons. Or Apex is way better than Call of Duty for all these reasons. And it becomes very tribalistic instead of just like, I don't know, maybe they're all like pretty good. Except Call of Duty. Call of Duty sucks.
He took my thing.